So a lot of people have been having trouble with the Solis Nova boss fight here, and also some of the earlier stages in the Solis Nova area. And I previously made a video that was like a proof of concept, free to play could clear. But the problem with that was that I used a lot of time gated event monsters. And so I wanted to make more of a guide type of video. And so that's what this is. So there's three sets. For these first two, you can play either Soldier, Lancer, Mage, Morpher, or Rook. I wouldn't really recommend any other classes because these classes can scale off of defense with their abilities. I'll kind of get a little more into that when we go into the actual set. But for this third set, you definitely need Rook or Treasure Hunter. Rook is better, it's more consistent, but you can clear with Treasure Hunter if you want to. So going right into it, like I was saying, you want to play classes that have this kind of text on their ability that uses both of like an attack defense or magic attack, magic defense, or magic defense, stuff like that. Because that way you can take advantage of having a higher defense stat than attack stat since you're using a lot of weapons that are off class. Speaking of which, for any returning players, you know that you want to only have on class weapons. So for Soldier, that would be swords and axes. But this is if you don't have anything from spawns. This is just story and event gear. You can have these regular event weapons from Cradle to Vengeance quest. You can have these be swords, but I didn't feel like grinding out and farming a bunch of swords for an example if they didn't matter, and the difference is so minimal that it just doesn't really make a difference. But yeah, so you just want to play these Sakura, electric Sakura weapons you get from story, and then 5 of these. If you have spawn stuff, you can flip it in for like any of these like stat stick type things. But if you don't, these will work. One thing about these electric Sakura weapons is if you can, you want to get these synergy skills for the time elemental tag +1. You can't get it, it's fine. It's a little bit extra damage. So yeah. And then also, depending on the class you play, just make sure you're main slotting the best things you can. Like for example, Mage would want to main slot the book because Time Spellbook is your best DPS option for that class with dual scaling. For defense gear, none of it really matters except for these 5, and the only reason this one matters is because it has this little wind element. To max scale these need 5 total, counting themselves. So that's all you really care about. These are like all pretty good gears from the story that you get, but you don't need these. These will help you take less damage, deal more damage, get Unison faster, and this is just a stat stick for this set's purposes. For these are current event defense gears, but you do not need them. You do not need to scale them. If you have 5 different ones, you could have 5 different ones. It doesn't matter. These are just here for this stat right here. And just make sure, depending on the class you're playing, you want to change up this ratio a little bit. Like for example, if you're playing Lancer gets more stats from helmets than it does armor, so you would just flip-flop this. Mage is very similar, it just wants hats and clothing, not helmets and armor. So just make sure you know what type of gear you have and put on what's advantageous. Same thing with this. These are physical AP up and crit chance defense gear constants. If you're playing Mage, you want the magical ones. Just depends on the type of damage you deal. Right here it says physical, so if you're dealing physical, you want the physical ones. If you're dealing magic, you want the magic ones. And yeah. These are little one stat time elemental monsters. You want time element to get more damage. You would prefer to have monsters with stats, but these are just for the sake of example that you don't need those. You can just use even these one stat things if this is all you had. These type of monsters, you're not going to get these exact ones because this is a collaboration monster. But you can, from frame point spawn, you can get like little goblins and stuff that are very similar cost to this and functionally identical because they will have this time element. So you can get those little 1 cost, or 2 cost, or 3 cost monsters for very cheap from the frame point spawn, no gems required. And yeah, so you can use those instead. Or any SSR URs you have, you'll see in some of the other examples. I kind of flip around the monsters a little bit. The main thing for this set that you want is just a really strong monster. What monster that is depends on the game at the time. Current monsters, there's so many current monsters you could clear this with. This is just one of the newest. I would check around with the official and community Discord servers to see what current spawns are good and like what monsters are good. Anything that they tell you for like what's really good is probably going to be good enough to clear the quest. The list would just be too long to like give an actual list of all the monsters that could do it. So I'm not gonna do that. But yeah, that strat, it's just getting Solis Nova from 100 HP to 0 HP. There's no like real strategy to it. It's just hitting him. For the second set, it's exactly the same, except I did switch these out. But like I said, it doesn't matter. You don't have to do that. And then I messed around with the monsters a little bit just to show like you get quite a bit different stats if you are putting on monsters like these 37 costs, which by today's standards is kind of outdated. But they do give a decent amount of stats. So you can see the difference there. It's like an extra 100k in each stat, and that's just going to contribute to more damage. But the main thing you need is a monster that applies Time Slice, preferably 60 seconds. You can get away with less, but you would rather have more. And that's all you really need. You just, when he applies Hero, which is that yellow HP bar, yellow circle around him, you will use your Time Slice monster, and if it's got enough time, or if enough time passes, the entire buff will go away, and he'll just go back to a blue HP bar. It will be full blue HP, but that's going to be much easier to beat through because he won't have his buffs anymore. He won't have increased max HP, so it'll be a lot easier to kill him. The reason I have this specific monster in the set, and you'll see in the example footage, is because she does the least with Time Slice of monsters I had available. So, for example, Concerto is a buff that the CPUs will also apply, so this is negligible. All these other buffs are pretty negligible for what this is. The only thing that matters is this bubble here, and so you don't need this to clear. It's just, it helps. You could use really any kind of buffs, like strong buff monster instead for the first and third Unison in the video. I did a third Unison just to show as if you needed to throw a third monster to get like a special bubble or buff on after you Time Slice. So that's all that third Unison for is. You'll see in the video, it's like immediately after I do the second one. As soon as I get Unison again, I go for another one just to simulate that, to make it more relatable, make it, you know, more likely to be something that you would experience. And yeah. So for the third one, it's kind of like a cheese strat. If you're having a lot of difficulty with the boss, I think this is probably the easiest way to do it. You just need these 3 specific gear to even do it. So first, you need an ability that applies stun with a high success value, like Blunt Stun. It's 90. For Treasure Hunter, they have Cancel that you can enchant to get 80 success. So you want to enchant these to get the highest success value that you can. Then you want to have a monster in your main slot. This is the only free-to-play option, but you can get the others from spawns. There's different ones with more, but you want to get at least this free monster that has the 10 success value. You might be able to clear without it. I don't know. I haven't tried it. I would rather just like have higher success than lower, but maybe you could clear without this. I don't know how big of a difference it's really making, but I would just recommend having it regardless. And then, yeah, you want a monster like this. It does not have to be here. I'll show a couple monsters that have similar effects. But you want a monster that has reduced status ailment resistance value by 100 for 90 seconds. This is 100. When it is level 1, it'll be 60. And then you get the extra 40 from leveling it up to 5. So it becomes 100. So that's what you want, is you want 100 to get the max reduction. One thing of note with this is the boss can remove this. So you'll see in the footage, like I said, but you want to do this, you want to throw this monster right before you go for the stun, so that way you can like maximize your chances of landing the stun. If you stun too late, he will get hero up and it won't work. If you stun too early, you might stun him and he'll do a different ability and that'll go away. And even with a monster like this, you don't get another chance. If you apply a status ailment to a monster in PvE, their natural resistance goes up the more times you do that, because the devs don't want you chain stunning stuff. So you cannot do it again. It will not work, at least not with like a set like this. Maybe if you had a way to increase this, like your ability to apply stun had a higher success rate on the ability, you could maybe do it again. But just for what this is, you're not going to be able to do it again, so don't even think about it. Just reset. It sucks, but yeah, all 3 of these sets are probably going to take multiple attempts, especially if you're new to the game and aren't familiar with how to play. You're probably going to have to go through several attempts to get these, but these sets can clear. And again, with these little one stat monsters, You would prefer to have more stats. I just put these on for the example footage to show that you can clear with these. It does not matter. But yeah. So some monsters with Time Slice are these monsters. You don't have to have any of these. There's plenty of monsters that are different that have Time Slice, but these are just some of the more common ones. The CPUs will throw this monster, but they never throw the blue version in my experience. So that's the one Time Slice. You would have to do that. These 4 are 30-second Time Slice, so they're not as good, but you could maybe get away with it. It'll just slow your time for your rundown. Aster has Time Slice right here, but she also has in her main kit, she has the status ailment resistance value decrease right here too, so you could use her for either potentially, just depending on which one you prefer. And then for the status monsters, these 2 are monsters with just example monsters of some spawn monsters with the 30 passive instead of Jabberwock's 10, but you don't need the increase. Like I said, you can use Jabberwock. These monsters all do status down, and there's so many more that will. Some of them you'll have to look over here in the potentials, like with Aster's Time Slice. Here's another example, Louis X Vermes, right here. It's pretty easy to find monsters like this. If you are having trouble, what you can do is you can click that little button, go to Limitpedia, or go to the separate website through your browser, go to monsters, and then you type in the exact wording of the skill, and it'll make a narrow list of potential monsters. Some of them won't actually have it, so you'll have to manually check one by one for whatever monster you might have that shows up on the list. You'll have to check for that. But for the most part, it's a lot easier than sorting through all the monsters that have ever come out for the game. So I do recommend that if you're having trouble finding a monster that can apply either of these, Time Slice or the status down. But yeah, that's about it. I do have example footage for these 2 sets, and for abilities, stuff like that, it changes depending on like the game balance and like whatever current class rings are out. So just ask, and or maybe check the description, and I might have like a list of abilities each class would kind of want to use of the 5 that are recommended. But that's just if I remember to do it. So yeah, if you have any questions, just comment below. For as long as I can, I'll try to keep up with it and respond. But if I don't get back to you, sorry. And yeah, that's about it.